Hey students, it's Mr. Sharp here with our first video in our 7th unit of American History 1. This is probably going to be the longest unit that we have. However, it's also going to be the most pivotal and darkest moment in American history as we lead everything, all events that we've talked about so far. We're going to boil up to the Civil War. And this is where we're going to start today with going back to the issue of slavery. It's going to continue to divide the country and continue to tear us apart. So, some of the big items that you'll see today. We're going to start to look at the political views of both the northern and southern states as they start to merge after the admission of California into the Union. We're also going to look at the rise of the Free Soil Party that's going to rise as an effort to resist the expansion of slavery. In addition to that, we're going to see how Congress is going to settle this issue temporarily, but how that compromise that they try to put into effect is only going to make this period from 1850 to 1860 a big boiling pot, just a big boiling moment for the country. Let's go ahead and get started. So the terms that we have here will be seen they will be highlighted in yellow in the notes today. So make sure you capture that. You can pause the video at any time that you need to. Let's go ahead and get into it. So, from when we last left off in Unit 6, California's just had its gold rush. In 1 year, they went from having just a few thousand people to over 200,000 people within 1 year. And now they have enough people, they want to say, hey, let's join the Union. What could possibly go wrong? The only problem is they want to come in as a free state. What's this going to do to this balance in Congress between the free and southern states? So, as we all know, this balance has been happening since 1820 with the Compromise of 1820, but now there's 15 free states in the north and 15 slave states in the south. If we admit one free state, it's going to put that balance towards the free states. Southerners aren't going to have that. So, a Pennsylvania politician at this time, Wilmot, is going to push forward the Wilmot Proviso, and it's going to be a law that states, hey, we just got all this land from Mexico after the Mexican-American War. This territory should be free. There should be no slavery. It should be outlawed in this territory for good. And that was the Wilmot Proviso. However, Southern congressmen are going to just going to outright say no to this. And this Wilmot Proviso, it will go past in the House with Northern support, but it will fail in the Senate. This happens over 12 years. Over the course of 12 years, it will happen in the same thing. Pass in the House, fail in the Senate. It never comes full right because Northern and Southern politicians are not going to cooperate with each other. Wonder where you've heard that from, where political parties don't cooperate with each other. But with that said, it seems at this point with California's admission that there's no such thing as Whigs or Democrats anymore. It's now you're a Northern politician or you're a Southern politician. You're either for the abolition or the stalemate of slavery where it is, or the expansion of slavery in the South. And this is going to put these congressmen at odds. So as we go through this course, you guys, obviously we got a picture of New York as it's starting to sprawl at this time, as it's starting to grow, as well as the other parts of the country in the 1850s. And then continuing on with that Wilmot Proviso, this is going to put forth a really big issue. However, during all this, there are some Northern politicians who are like, man, some of our guys just want to just not talk about slavery, just keep it in its place. We want to get rid of it. So there's going to be a bunch of Whigs and some Democrats who will form together and join what's called the Free Soil Party. They're going to be in favor of resisting slavery wherever it goes and making sure that any lands or new states that are put into place are free, meaning that slavery is outlawed. So this new Free Soil Party, they're going to put forth their own presidential candidate in the election of 1848, Martin Van Buren, the former president after Andrew Jackson. So in the election of 1848, after this, this was the end of the Mexican-American War, and Zachary Taylor, who was a general in that war, has now decided, hey, I'm going to be the Whigs nomination. I'm going to be the Whigs candidate for that presidential election. But both the Democrats and the Whigs know that the issue of slavery is so shaky right now with voters that they're just going to kind of stay in the middle. They're just going to stay, what if we just let everybody figure it out for themselves and just idea of this popular sovereignty? How about that? So popular sovereignty was the idea of letting voters decide whether their territory or whether their area should be free or slave or not. So they were just going to say that so that way they can just pass the ball and say, we're not going to say anything about it, so that way you guys can like us. Um, that's not going to go over very well after the next couple of years. But in the 1848 election, Zachary Taylor wins just because he's a war hero. But it definitely shows that the Free Soil Party is starting to gain some ground. They don't win any electoral votes. They win 10% of the popular vote, meaning that 10% of the population at the time were full-blown out abolitionists. Like, we need to get rid of it right now. Picture of Martin Van Buren and his running mate right there in the Free Soil Party. And again, a picture of the election results as we see here. Again, even though the Free Soil Party doesn't win any electoral votes, they win a pretty good amount of the popular vote. But after the election, what's going to happen with this whole Wilmot Proviso? So in 1849, California's already put forth that, hey, we want to become a state. What's the verdict, guys? But northern and southern states are going to go back and forth saying, no, we can't have this. While the northern states saying, yes, we can admit it as a free state. Southerners like, no, you can't do that because it's going to give you guys the edge and we won't have. So there's a lot of going back and forth. Where do we see that again? But again, into the rescue comes an old figure that we've learned back from the past. He was a great compromiser in 1820. With the Compromise of 1820, he's going to come back into the day in his 70s and come back to save the day again. Henry Clay. He's going to come forth and say, hey, let's come to a compromise like we did 30 years ago with the Compromise of 1820. Only this time, we're going to call it Compromise of 1850. Big shock. Even though he's going to put forth the sets of this compromise to admit California as a free state, but also give incentives for the southern states to make the Fugitive Slave Act stricter to just appease the Southerners. Some of those old characters like John C. Calhoun and Daniel Webster are going to come back and put their own 2 cents into it. Remember John C. Calhoun from South Carolina? He's a big sectionalist. He's also going to come forth even in his 70s, but he's going to argue against Henry Clay's system, like it's still pandering to Northerners and it's going to be awful. So if southern states are going to be put under this belt, they have the right to secede. While Daniel Webster saying, guys, we need to come together. We need to talk about unity as a country. Both of those voices are going to be heard in the halls of Congress. And the 1850 compromise will pass finally in September with a lot of different back and forths, but it'll finally pass with the Compromise of 1850. 3 things come out of this compromise, guys, and remember this, and it's on the bottom of your list here. It admitted California as a free state. It allowed for popular sovereignty in the territories, meaning that those territories can choose whether they want to be slave or not. And it revised an old law passed in 1793, the Fugitive Slave Law, only this time it made it a lot stricter. So what I mean by stricter is with this new Fugitive Slave Act in 1850, it made every citizen in the United States essentially liable, meaning they were legally obligated to become part of this slave system. They had to help and assist law enforcement to capture runaway enslaved persons. So how do you think that's going to make a lot of people feel? In the South, it's probably not going to be too bad, but in the North, it's going to feel like, oh, no, we can't have this. So and some more pictures from what San Francisco is going to look like with just 1 year. They just boom overnight, literally. And again, some pictures of the territories, and you see California was just supposed to be one part of the territory, but because of that gold rush, boom, becomes, hey, we can go apply for statehood in just 1 year. How about that? All right, so Northerners are really going to take the Fugitive Slave Act in 1850 as a bad taste in the mouth because they now see, okay, now we're just pandering to these Southern elitists. We're pandering to these plantation owners just to help them capture people who are running away because they're mistreating people. So what's this all going to happen after the Compromise of 1850 is going to pass, many Northerners are going to start to defy that law. Yes, they're obligated legally to help aid and assist catchers, but something else is going to happen. Southerner law enforcement will come into northern states and just try to point out individual freed African Americans, say, you were a former slave of this master, so you had to come back to us. And that was legal part of the Fugitive Slave Act. But Northerners are going to be like, you can't just do that. That's impeding on our states. So they're going to defy that new Fugitive Slave Act. It's also going to put a lot of African Americans in fear because they could have been free for many years, for many decades. But if only one person swore before a judge that you were a former slave, you could have been put back into the system of slavery, even though you weren't born into it. It just didn't make sense. So, and if you don't believe me, if you've ever seen the movie or read the book 12 Years a Slave, it actually talks about a northern musician who was essentially kidnapped and sold into slavery by Northerners just for the sake of it. So that's a really tragic story, which was true. Not only that, but enslaved peoples are going to find new ways to escape into the North, particularly because Northerners are going to start to help enslaved Africans to get out, to escape. Some of the best known instances of this is in Pennsylvania, where we have a big Quaker population. Again, Quakers are still against slavery, and they're going to start to make agencies and different outpost homes, so where escaped enslaved Africans can go to those houses, escape underneath the house, under the cover of darkness, strategically move into different areas to hide from different slave catchers until they can finally get into Pennsylvania. Once they get to Pennsylvania, they'll reach out with some new agents to get them into Canada, to get them into Mexico, nations that are free legally. So this was a system called the Underground Railroad. You guys have heard about this before, but it's a lot more strategic than just like an underground layer you just walk under. Is being able to know your connections, really. But one of the most influential figures of the Underground Railroad is a young woman in her 20s. By this time she starts working into it, Harriet Tubman. Tubman is her married name when she married before she escaped from Maryland into Pennsylvania. But over the course of her time, she'll spend over a decade going back and forth between Pennsylvania and Maryland, connecting more enslaved peoples to get out, to escape, and get them to freedom. There's an estimate that she helped over 300 people escape into Pennsylvania, and then furthermore reached them out to agents to get them out of the country. So, and Northerners were in support of this, while Southerners are not going to be in support of this at all. And another thing that's really going to heighten the tensions is going to be how Northerners start to make Southerners look. In particular, in 1852, just 2 years after the compromise was made, Harriet Beecher Stowe, she publishes out a very influential book, not a great read, but very influentially political-wise, Uncle Tom's Cabin. It's a fictional story, but it portrays the Southern plantation owner as abusive, and that slavery is, of course, wrong. But when it's published in the North, more Northerners are going to start to gravitate towards this idea of, hey, maybe we should get rid of slavery. So it's going to grow the sentiment of anti-slavery movement more and more in the North, while Southerners are just going to outright ban the book in the Southern states for the most part. And it's going to bring those conflicts between Northerners and Southerners continuing divide them. And again, it's going to continue to look like Southerners are continuing to be more the oppressors. Northerners are continuing to say, no, you're oppressing us and you're oppressing others, so we have to free enslaved peoples. And again, you can see there were more than just these routes between Maryland and Pennsylvania. They were all across the country. The primary target, though, the Underground Railroad, was to primarily get out of the country, because even in the North states, you weren't really safe. You had to want to get into Canada, you had to get into Mexico, you had to probably get into Haiti, areas where you knew that you could be free and that you can legally stay there. So with that said, that's going to wrap up this part. When we come back next time, we're going to see how this violence continues to ensue at probably tenfold, even on the Congress floor. But it's all going to boil up to the Civil War.